I inherited an abandoned beach cabin from my wife, and my son got the villa in Italy. He sneered, "Go live with the rats," and kicked me out. I drove there just to have a place to sleep, but when I forced the door open, I stopped breathing at what I saw. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own son would look at me with such disgust. Standing in the living room I had called home for 37 years, I watched Douglas rifle through the will like he was counting lottery tickets. His face twisted into something I barely recognized when he reached the part about the properties. "A beach cabin?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "Dad gets some rotting shack on the coast and I get the villa in Tuscany?" He let out a harsh laugh that made my chest tighten. "Well, that's just perfect. Even in death, Mom knew who deserved what." I kept my mouth shut. What was the point of arguing? Jennifer had made her choices, and apparently I wasn't worth much in her final accounting. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, cleared his throat awkwardly from behind his mahogany desk. He'd known our family for 15 years, watched Douglas grow from a spoiled teenager into a spoiled adult, but he stayed professional. "Your mother left very specific instructions," Patterson said carefully. "The cabin property is fully paid off, Robert. No mortgages, no liens." Douglas snorted. "Great. Dad can live with the rats and seagulls." He turned to me, and I saw something cold flicker in his eyes. Something I'd been seeing more often since Jennifer got sick. "Hope you like the smell of low tide." My hands clenched involuntarily. This wasn't grief talking. This was Douglas being Douglas, the same kid who used to break my tools and blame the neighbors' children. Jennifer had always defended him, always found excuses. "He's just expressing himself," she'd say. "Boys need to find their own way." Well, he'd found his way all right. Straight to cruelty. Patterson slid a set of keys across the desk. "The cabin is located at 127 Driftwood Lane in Clearwater Beach. It's been unoccupied for some time." "Unoccupied?" Douglas laughed again. "That's a nice way of saying abandoned." I pocketed the keys without looking at them. The metal felt cold against my fingers. "How long has it been empty?" Patterson hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure. Mrs. Holloway was very private about that property." Douglas was already gathering his paperwork, shoving it into his leather briefcase. "Well, this has been fun, but I have a flight to catch. The villa needs to be appraised, and I want to see what I'm working with." He paused at the door, looking back at me with that same expression he'd worn when he was 12 and I'd caught him stealing from my wallet. "You should probably pack your things, Dad. I'm putting the house on the market next week." The words hit me like a physical blow. "This is my house too, Douglas." "Not anymore." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Mom left it to me along with everything else that matters. You've got 48 hours." The door slammed behind him, and suddenly the house felt enormous and empty. Patterson was packing his briefcase, avoiding my eyes. I couldn't blame him. Watching a family tear itself apart probably wasn't in his job description. "Mr. Holloway," he said quietly, "if you need any help understanding the legal aspects." I shook my head. I understood perfectly. My wife of 35 years had died 6 months ago, and my son was throwing me out like yesterday's garbage. The house where I'd raised him, where I'd painted every room and fixed every broken faucet, where I'd held Jennifer through her final illness, wasn't mine anymore. That night, I sat in my empty living room surrounded by boxes. Douglas hadn't wasted any time. He'd hired movers to come the next morning, and they'd take everything that belonged to him, which apparently was everything Jennifer had cared about. The good china, the antique furniture her mother had left her, even the family photos. I picked up one picture that had fallen from a box. It was from our wedding day, Jennifer in her white dress, me in my rented tuxedo, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. She looked so young, so happy. When had that changed? When had I become someone she could discard so easily? My phone buzzed. A text from Douglas. "Movers come at 8 a.m. Don't get in their way." I turned off the phone and went to bed in my own house for the last time. The next morning, I loaded my pickup truck with everything that was truly mine. It wasn't much: my clothes, some tools, a few books Jennifer had never cared about. The movers barely acknowledged me as they carried out 37 years of my life. One of them almost took my toolbox until I explained it wasn't on their list. By noon, the house was empty of everything except me and my truck keys. I sat in the driveway for a long time, engine running, looking at the house where I'd expected to grow old. The roses Jennifer had planted were starting to bloom. I'd fertilized them just last week, the same way I had every spring for 15 years. Someone else would enjoy them now. The drive to Clearwater Beach took 2 hours. I'd never been to this part of the coast, never even known Jennifer owned property here. How long had she kept this secret? And why give it to me if it was as worthless as Douglas seemed to think? Driftwood Lane turned out to be a narrow, sandy road that dead-ended at the beach. The houses were a mix of old beach cottages and newer construction. Some looked like million-dollar getaways, others like they'd been abandoned for years. Number 1. 27 was definitely in the second category. I parked in front of what might have been a driveway once upon a time. Now it was just sand and weeds. The cabin itself looked like it had been fighting a losing battle against the salt air for decades. The blue paint was faded and peeling, the front porch sagged dangerously, and several windows were boarded up. This was what Jennifer had left me. This was her final message. But as I sat there in my truck, something nagged at me. Jennifer had been many things: cold, distant, sometimes cruel in her quiet way, but she wasn't stupid. She'd managed our finances carefully, never made a decision without considering all the angles. Why would she hold on to a worthless property for years? I grabbed my toolbox from the truck bed and walked up to the front door. The key Patterson had given me was old and tarnished, but it turned smoothly in the lock. Too smoothly for a door that hadn't been opened in years. The door swung open with barely a creak, and that's when I realized this wasn't going to be what I'd expected at all. The first thing that hit me wasn't the smell of decay I'd expected. It was lavender, faint but definitely there, like someone had been burning scented candles recently. I stood in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The inside of the cabin was nothing like the outside suggested. Yes, the furniture was old, but it was clean, dust-free. A soft blue throw blanket was draped over a faded floral couch, and there were fresh flowers, wilted, but not dead, in a mason jar on the coffee table. Someone had been living here. I set my toolbox down carefully, afraid to disturb anything. The hardwood floors creaked under my weight, but they were swept clean. Through the small kitchen, I could see dishes in the drying rack by the sink. 2 plates, 2 cups, silverware arranged neatly on a dish towel. My mouth went dry. Who had Jennifer allowed to live in her secret property? And why hadn't Patterson mentioned it? I moved deeper into the cabin, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The kitchen was tiny but functional. The refrigerator hummed quietly, and when I opened it, I found it nearly empty but plugged in. A half-gallon of milk, expired 3 days ago. Some leftover soup in a container. Medications lined up on the top shelf. Medications with a name I didn't recognize. Sarah Chen. Prescriptions for things I'd never heard of, but the dates were recent, some from just last week. I picked up one of the bottles, reading the label carefully. The address listed was this cabin. Sarah Chen had been using this place as her primary residence, but where was she now? The living room had more clues. A stack of mail on the side table, mostly bills and medical correspondence, all addressed to Sarah Chen at 127 Driftwood Lane. But mixed in with her mail were envelopes addressed to Jennifer Holloway. Same address. My hands shook as I picked up one of Jennifer's letters. It was from her oncologist, dated 2 months before she died. An appointment confirmation for a consultation she'd never told me about. Jennifer had been coming here regularly. I sank into the couch, trying to process what I was finding. My wife of 35 years had maintained a secret life in this cabin. She'd been receiving medical care I knew nothing about, and she'd been sharing this space with someone named Sarah Chen. How was that possible? How had she hidden this from me for God knows how long? A photo album sat on the coffee table, and I opened it with trembling fingers. The first page stopped my heart. It was a picture of Jennifer, but not the Jennifer I knew. This Jennifer was smiling, really smiling, in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was sitting on the beach just outside this cabin, her arm around a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes. They looked comfortable together, happy even. I flipped through more pages. Jennifer and this woman, Sarah, cooking together in the tiny kitchen, walking on the beach, sitting on the porch, reading books. In every photo, Jennifer looked relaxed, peaceful. The way she used to look when we first met, before life and disappointment and Douglas's constant demands had worn her down. There were photos of Sarah alone, too. She appeared to be in her 30s, with a gentle face and careful movements. In several pictures, she was using a walker or sitting in a wheelchair. Medical equipment was visible in the background of some shots. My throat tightened. Jennifer had been caring for someone. This Sarah person was clearly dealing with health issues, and my wife had been helping her. But why keep it secret? Why hide something so compassionate? I heard footsteps on the porch outside. I froze, the photo album still open in my lap. The front door handle turned slowly, and I watched as a key slid into the lock from the outside. Someone else had a key to this place. The door opened, and the woman from the photographs stepped inside. Sarah Chen was smaller than she'd appeared in the pictures, and she moved carefully with the help of forearm crutches. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore scrubs like she'd just come from a medical appointment. She didn't see me at first. She was focused on maneuvering through the door with a bag of groceries. "Jenny?" she called out softly. "I got those crackers you wanted. The doctor said your appetite might—" She looked up and saw me sitting on her couch. We stared at each other for a long moment. Her face went through several expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like recognition. "You're Robert," she said finally. It wasn't a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. How did she know who I was? Sarah set down her groceries and moved to the chair across from me. She settled carefully, placing her crutches within reach. "She said you might come here eventually." "She?" But I already knew the answer. "Jenny, your wife." Sarah's voice was gentle, like she was talking to someone who'd just received terrible news. "She talked about you all the time." I found my voice. "I don't understand. Who are you? Why were you living with my wife?" Sarah smiled sadly. "I wasn't living with her. She was visiting me. This is my home, Robert. Jenny bought it for me 3 years ago." The room spun slightly. Jennifer had bought this property for a stranger? That's impossible. We never had that kind of money. She used her inheritance from her mother, the money she told you she'd donated to charity. Sarah's expression was kind but firm. "She wanted you to know the truth eventually, but she was scared." "Scared of what?" Sarah reached for a manila envelope that was sitting on the side table. "Scared of how you'd react when you learned I was her daughter." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the arms of the couch, feeling like the world had tilted sideways. "That's impossible. Jennifer never had children before Douglas." "Yes, she did." Sarah opened the envelope and pulled out a birth certificate. "She had me when she was 17. She gave me up for adoption because her parents threatened to disown her if she kept me." I stared at the document she was holding out. Sarah Chen, born Sarah Jennifer Holloway. Mother, Jennifer Marie Holloway. Father, unknown. "She found me 2 years before she got sick," Sarah continued. "Hired a private investigator. She'd been looking for me for decades." My mind reeled. Jennifer had a daughter she'd given up and then found again, a daughter she'd hidden from me for 3 years while she was dying. Why didn't she tell me? The words came out as barely a whisper. Sarah's expression grew even sadder. "Because of Douglas, she was afraid he'd make things difficult for me, and because—" She hesitated. "Because what?" "Because she was ashamed of giving me up, of lying to you about the money, of keeping secrets. She said you were a good man who deserved better than a wife who'd spent their marriage living with so many lies." I looked around the cabin again, seeing it differently now. This wasn't Jennifer's secret hideaway. This was where she'd come to be a mother to the daughter she'd lost, to make up for 37 years of absence in whatever time she had left. And she'd died without ever telling me the truth. Sarah was watching my face carefully. "She left something for you. She made me promise to give it to you if you ever came here." She reached behind the couch and pulled out a wooden box I'd made in high school shop class. I'd given it to Jennifer when we started dating, and I hadn't seen it in years. I'd assumed she'd thrown it away long ago. "She kept it all these years," Sarah said softly. "She said it was the most precious thing she owned because you made it for her when you still believed in forever." Inside the box were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to me in Jennifer's careful handwriting. The top one was dated just 2 weeks before she died. My hands shook as I unfolded it and began to read. "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, then you've met Sarah, and you know the truth I was too cowardly to tell you while I was alive. I have so much to explain, so much to apologize for, but first you need to know about Douglas." I looked up at Sarah, who was watching me with Jennifer's eyes I should have recognized from the moment she walked in. "What about Douglas?" I read Jennifer's letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. My hands trembled as I held the paper that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and my son. "My dearest Robert," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then you've met Sarah, and you know the truth I was too cowardly to tell you while I was alive. I have so much to explain, so much to apologize for, but first you need to know about Douglas." I paused, looking up at Sarah, who sat quietly in her chair, her hands folded in her lap. She was letting me process this at my own pace, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "She wrote this for you," Sarah said softly. "She spent weeks working on it. She wanted to make sure she explained everything properly." I returned to the letter. "Douglas is in serious financial trouble, though he doesn't know the full extent yet. 3 months ago, he took out a massive loan against the villa in Italy, using forged documents that made it appear I had co-signed. He owes $850,000 to a private lending company, and the payment was due last week." My stomach dropped. $850,000. I read the number again, hoping I'd misunderstood. But Jennifer's handwriting was clear and precise. "The villa isn't worth enough to cover what he owes, and when the lenders discover the fraud, Douglas will face criminal charges. I found out about it when the bank called me directly to verify the loan. That's when I hired a private investigator to dig deeper." I set the letter down for a moment, my mind reeling. Douglas had committed fraud. My son, the one who'd just kicked me out of my own home, was a criminal. And Jennifer had known about it before she died. Sarah cleared her throat gently. "There's more, Robert, about the medical treatments." I picked up the letter again. "I've been coming to the cabin not just to spend time with Sarah, but because I've been receiving experimental cancer treatment at the medical center here in Clearwater. The cancer came back 2 years ago, more aggressive than before. I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to watch you go through that pain again." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Jennifer had been fighting cancer alone. While I thought she was getting better, while I believed her checkups were just routine, she was dying and facing it by herself. "She didn't want you to see her suffer," Sarah said quietly. "She said you'd been through enough the first time, and she couldn't put you through watching her waste away again." I remembered those days from her first bout with cancer 15 years earlier. The chemotherapy that left her weak and nauseous, the way she'd lost her hair, the nights I'd held her while she cried from pain and fear. It had been the hardest thing we'd ever faced together, but we'd faced it together. "She should have told me," I whispered. "She wanted to. Every day she wanted to. But Douglas kept demanding more and more of her attention, and she was so tired, Robert. She said it was easier to come here, where she could rest and spend time with me without having to pretend she was strong." I continued reading. "Sarah has a degenerative muscle condition that requires constant medical care. Her insurance doesn't cover everything she needs, and she can't work full-time because of her condition. I've been helping with her medical expenses, and I've arranged for her to receive a significant inheritance when I die. My throat tightened. While Douglas was stealing from us, Jennifer was using our money to care for the daughter she'd never stopped loving. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw the careful way she held herself, the subtle tremors in her hands that I'd initially attributed to nervousness. "What kind of condition?" I asked her. "Muscular dystrophy," Sarah replied. "Progressive. I was diagnosed when I was 25. My adoptive parents helped at first, but when they died in a car accident 5 years ago, I was on my own. Jenny found me just when I was about to lose my apartment." Jennifer had saved her daughter's life. While our son was destroying his own life with greed and fraud, my wife was quietly being a hero to the child she'd never been allowed to raise. I read on. "Robert, I need you to know that every penny I spent on Sarah came from my mother's inheritance, money that was mine to use as I saw fit. I never touched our joint accounts or your retirement savings, but Douglas has. The private investigator found evidence that he's been forging my signature on withdrawal slips for months." My hands clenched involuntarily. "How much?" Sarah reached for another folder. $43,000 from your retirement account. $27,000 from your savings. He's been taking small amounts each time, probably hoping you wouldn't notice. $70,000. Money I'd saved for decades, money I'd planned to live on when I could no longer work. Douglas had stolen it all, while looking me in the eye and calling me a failure. "There's more in the box," Sarah said gently. "Bank statements, copies of the forged documents, everything Jenny's investigator found." I pulled out the stack of papers with shaking hands. Transaction after transaction, all with my signature, but not my handwriting. Douglas had been practicing my signature, and he'd gotten good at it. Good enough to steal my life savings without anyone questioning it. The villa in Italy that he'd inherited wasn't just mortgaged, it was mortgaged to pay gambling debts he had racked up over the past 2 years. The private lending company he owed money to wasn't the kind that accepted payment plans. They were the kind that broke kneecaps. Jenny was trying to figure out how to help him without enabling him further, Sarah explained. She felt responsible because she'd always bailed him out before. But this time the amounts were too large and she was running out of time. I found another letter, this one shorter. "Robert, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand something important. The cabin isn't the worthless property Douglas thinks it is. The entire coastal area is being rezoned for commercial development. The state is buying out all the property owners to build a new marine research facility and public park. Sarah's cabin is worth approximately $2.7 million, and the sale is scheduled to close next month." I stared at the number. $2.7 million. I read it again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Sarah nodded when she saw my expression. "Jenny arranged it so that I would get $1.7 million, enough to secure my medical care for life, and then some. The remaining million goes to you, along with this cabin to live in until the sale closes." "But why didn't she just tell me? Why go through all this secrecy?" Sarah's smile was sad, but proud. "Because she wanted to make sure Douglas couldn't manipulate you into giving him the money. She knew that if you found out while she was alive, you'd feel obligated to save him from his debts. This way, the money is protected." I leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed. In one afternoon, I'd discovered that my wife had been dying in secret, that I had a stepdaughter who needed medical care, that my son was a thief and a fraud, and that I was about to become a millionaire. "What happens now?" I asked. Sarah reached for her crutches and stood carefully. "Now we wait for Douglas to figure out that the villa can't save him. Jenny's lawyer said he has maybe 2 weeks before the fraud catches up with him. The lending company he owes money to is already asking questions." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Douglas's name appeared on the screen. I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Answer it, but don't tell him anything yet. Jenny wanted you to see how he reacts when he thinks you have nothing." I swiped to answer. "Hello, Douglas." "Dad, thank God." His voice was strained, panicked, nothing like the arrogant tone he'd used when he threw me out. I need to talk to you. There's been a mistake with the villa. Some kind of paperwork issue. Can you come back to the house? I'm not welcome at the house, remember? You gave me 48 hours to leave. Dad, please, this is serious. I think someone might be trying to steal the inheritance. I need your help. I met Sarah's eyes. She shook her head slightly. I'm afraid I can't help you, Douglas. I'm dealing with my own problems right now. Well, what problems? Dad, you have to understand, this is bigger than both of us. The whole family inheritance is at risk. The family inheritance, I repeated slowly. You mean the inheritance you said I didn't deserve? The one that left me with nothing but a worthless shack? Silence on the other end. Dad, I know I said some things, but I was upset about Mom dying. You know I didn't mean it. Actually, Douglas, I think you meant every word. I hung up and turned off my phone. Sarah was smiling, and for the first time since I'd walked into this cabin, I smiled too. How long do you think it'll take him to realize he's in real trouble? I asked. Jenny thought about 2 days. That's when the interest payments come due and the lending company stops accepting excuses. I picked up Jennifer's letters again. There were still a dozen more to read, and I had the feeling the story was far from over. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what came next. 3 days after hanging up on Douglas, I was sitting on the cabin's small back porch with Sarah, watching the sunrise paint the gulf in shades of orange and pink. She'd been teaching me about Jennifer's daily routine here, the quiet rhythms of her secret life. My wife had been happier in this run-down cabin than she'd been in our pristine suburban home, and I was beginning to understand why. She used to sit right here every morning, Sarah said, adjusting her position in the wooden chair I'd reinforced the day before. She'd have her coffee and read the medical journals she brought from your house. She was researching my condition, trying to find new treatments. I sipped my own coffee from one of Jennifer's mismatched mugs. Everything in this cabin told a story of a woman I'd never really known, a mother who'd spent 3 years making up for lost time with a daughter who needed her. My phone had been buzzing intermittently for the past hour. Douglas again. I'd been ignoring his calls, but the frequency was increasing. Jennifer's timeline was proving accurate. You should probably answer that, Sarah said gently. Jenny wanted you to hear how desperate he gets. I glanced at the screen. 15 missed calls since yesterday. I swiped to answer. Dad, where the hell are you? Douglas's voice was frantic now, all pretense of politeness gone. I've been calling for days. I've been busy. Busy? Dad, I'm in serious trouble here. The bank is saying there are problems with the villa loan, and some company called Apex Financial is claiming I owe them money I never borrowed. I met Sarah's eyes. She nodded slightly. What kind of money? I asked. $850,000, Dad. They're saying I signed some contract, but I never signed anything. Someone must have forged my signature. The irony wasn't lost on me. Douglas, who'd spent months forging my signature to steal my savings, was now claiming someone had forged his. That's a lot of money, Douglas. I know that. That's why I need your help. We need to hire a lawyer, fight this thing. They're threatening to take the villa, and without that, you have nothing, I finished. I understand. Dad, you have to help me. I'm your son. I was quiet for a long moment, watching a pelican dive for fish just offshore. When you threw me out of my own house, did you feel like my son then? That was different. I was emotional, dealing with grief. You know I didn't mean it. Actually, I think you meant every word, just like you meant it when you said I didn't deserve anything from your mother's estate. Dad, please, I made mistakes, but this is bigger than hurt feelings. These people, they're not just threatening to take the villa, they're talking about criminal charges if I don't pay. Criminal charges for what? Silence stretched between us. I could practically hear Douglas calculating how much truth to reveal. They're saying I committed fraud when I applied for the loan, but Dad, I swear I never signed those papers. What papers would those be? Some kind of co-signer agreement that says Mom guaranteed the loan. But that's impossible, right? Mom would never have agreed to something like that without telling us. I closed my eyes. Jennifer had been right about everything. Douglas had forged her signature, committed fraud, and now he was trying to lie his way out of it. I don't know, Douglas. Your mother kept a lot of things from me, apparently. What does that mean? Nothing you need to worry about. You've got bigger problems right now. Dad, I need you to come back. We need to go through Mom's papers together, find proof that this is all a mistake. I'm not coming back. What do you mean you're not coming back? Where are you staying? I looked at Sarah, who was listening to every word with careful attention. I'm staying at the cabin. The cabin? Dad, that place doesn't even have running water. It has running water, it has electricity, it has everything I need. You can't be serious. You're going to live in that dump instead of fighting for what's rightfully ours? What's rightfully mine, Douglas, is what your mother left me, and she left me this cabin. She left you that cabin, because she felt sorry for you. The words exploded out of him before he could stop them. She told me so herself. She said you'd never amounted to much, and the cabin was like a consolation prize. The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking, but it didn't hurt the way it would have a week ago. Now I knew the truth about Jennifer's feelings, about why she'd really bought this place and what it meant to her. Is that what she told you? I asked calmly. Yes. She said you were too weak to handle real responsibility, that you'd always been a disappointment to her. Sarah's face had gone pale. She shook her head slightly, her eyes filling with tears. That's interesting, I said, because I've been reading some of your, mother's papers here at the cabin, and she had a very different opinion of me. And of you. What papers? Oh, just some financial documents, bank statements, medical records, things like that. Medical records? What medical records? I let the silence stretch, watching Sarah dab at her eyes with a tissue. Dad, what medical records? Nothing you need to worry about, Douglas. You've got your own problems to solve. Dad, please, I'm begging you, I need help. These people aren't going to wait much longer. What people, exactly? Apex Financial. They're not a regular bank, Dad. They do private lending for people who can't get traditional loans. Loan sharks. Douglas had borrowed nearly $1 million from loan sharks, and now he was panicking because they wanted their money back. That was probably not a smart financial decision, I said. I know that now, but at the time I thought the villa would be worth enough to cover it. The property values in Tuscany have been going up, and I figured I could flip it quickly. Flip it? You were planning to sell your mother's villa? I needed the money, Dad. I had some gambling debts, and they were getting expensive. Finally, a piece of truth. Douglas had gambling debts on top of everything else. How much do you owe in gambling debts? That's separate from this. How much, Douglas? About $200,000. My grip tightened on the phone. Douglas owed over $1 million to dangerous people, and he was trying to drag me down with him. I can't help you, I said. What do you mean you can't help me? You're my father. I'm your father when you need money. When you're throwing me out of my house, I'm just an old man who never amounted to anything. Dad, I was upset. People say things when they're upset. No, Douglas. You said what you really think, and now you're facing the consequences of your choices. My choices? Dad, someone forged my signature on that loan application. This isn't my fault. I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Douglas, I've seen the loan application. I've seen the signature. That's your handwriting. Silence. Then, in a voice so small I almost didn't recognize it. How could you have seen it? Because your mother hired a private investigator before she died. She knew what you'd been doing. That's impossible. She knew about the forged withdrawals from my retirement account. She knew about the money you stole from our savings. She knew about all of it. I could hear him breathing hard on the other end of the line. She also knew about your plan to sell the villa to pay your gambling debts. She knew you'd been lying to her for months. Dad, I can explain. No, you can't. Because there is no explanation for what you've done. You stole from your own father, you committed fraud using your dying mother's identity, and now you want me to bail you out. Please, Dad. I'm scared. These people, they're talking about more than just taking the villa. They're talking about... His voice broke. About what, Douglas? About making me disappear. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my son. He was terrified, and despite everything he'd done, he was still the boy I'd raised. But Jennifer's letters had prepared me for this moment, too. Douglas, your mother left instructions for exactly this situation. What instructions? Come to the cabin, tonight. Come alone and come prepared to tell the truth about everything. If you do that, there might be a way to help you, but if you lie to me one more time, if you try to manipulate me or threaten me, you're on your own. Dad, thank you. Thank God, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just come here. And Douglas? Yes? Bring the original loan documents, all of them. I hung up and turned to Sarah, who was watching me with Jennifer's eyes. Think he'll actually come? She asked. Oh, he'll come, and when he does, he's going to learn just how much his mother really knew about him. Douglas arrived just after sunset, his BMW looking completely out of place on the sandy road. I watched from the kitchen window as he sat in his car for several minutes, probably trying to gather courage or figure out his next lie. Sarah had retreated to her bedroom to give us privacy, but I knew she was listening. This conversation would affect her future as much as mine. When Douglas finally knocked, I let him wait. Jennifer's final letter had been very specific about how to handle this moment. Let him stew, she'd written. Let him realize he's completely dependent on your mercy. I opened the door to find my son looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, he looked like the scared little boy who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. Dad? He stepped inside, looking around the cabin with barely concealed disgust. This place is smaller than I expected. It has everything I need. He noticed the photo album on the coffee table, still open to pictures of Jennifer and Sarah. Who's that woman with Mom? Someone your mother cared about very much. Douglas picked up one of the photos, studying it closely. I've never seen her before. When was this taken? Sit down, Douglas. We have a lot to talk about. He took the chair across from me, clutching a manila folder against his chest like armor. Dad, I brought the loan documents like you asked, but I want you to know I had nothing to do with whatever Mom signed. I was as shocked as anyone when the bank said she'd co-signed. I opened Jennifer's wooden box and pulled out the investigator's report. Let's start with something simpler. My retirement account. Can you explain these withdrawals? I slid the bank statements across the coffee table. Douglas's face went white as he recognized his own forged signatures. I can explain that. I'm listening. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he'd been caught in a lie. I borrowed some money. I was going to pay it back. $70,000. You were going to pay back $70,000 that you stole from your father's retirement savings. I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. Without asking, using forged signatures. That's called theft, Douglas. His face flushed red. You would never have given it to me if I'd asked. You're absolutely right, because I knew you'd gamble it away. How did you? He stopped himself, realizing he'd just confirmed what I already knew. How did I know about your gambling problem? Your mother hired a very thorough investigator. Would you like to see the photos of you at the casino? The ones from last month when you were supposed to be at her funeral planning? Douglas slumped forward, his head in his hands. Dad, I'm sick. Gambling addiction is a real disease. I know it is, but using it as an excuse to steal from your family isn't treatment, it's enabling. I wanted to get help. I was going to get help. When? After you'd stolen everything we had? He looked up at me with tears in his eyes, and for a moment I felt the old familiar tug of paternal protectiveness. But Jennifer's letters had prepared me for this too. He'll cry, she'd written. He'll say he's sick, that he needs help, that he's sorry. Don't let him manipulate you the way he manipulated me. Tell me about the villa loan, I said. Douglas wiped his eyes and opened his folder. It's all a misunderstanding. Someone forged Mom's signature on the cosigner documents. I never asked her to guarantee anything. I pulled out the investigator's photos. Clear images of Douglas at a bank in Miami, signing documents. Bank security camera footage showing him presenting identification for both himself and Jennifer. "This is you," I said, pointing to the photos, "at First National Bank in Miami 3 months ago." Douglas stared at the images, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "The bank teller remembers you," I continued. "You told her your mother was too ill to travel, but she'd given you power of attorney to handle the loan." "That's not—" "I never said that." "Douglas, stop lying. Your mother is dead. I'm the only family you have left who might help you, and you're still lying to me." Something in my tone must have gotten through to him because his shoulders sagged in defeat. "I needed the money," he whispered. "The people I owed money to, they weren't going to wait anymore. They said if I didn't pay them back, they'd hurt me." "So you decided to hurt your mother instead. She was dying anyway." The words exploded out of him, shocking us both with their cruelty. "The cancer was back and the doctors said she had maybe 6 months. I figured what was the point of saving money for a future she wouldn't live to see?" I felt ice water flood my veins. "You knew about the cancer." "Of course I knew. I saw the medical bills. I knew she was getting treatment somewhere." "And you used that knowledge to justify stealing from her." "I didn't steal from her. I used her credit to get a loan I couldn't qualify for on my own. The plan was to pay it back before she died." "With what money?" "With the villa money. I researched the property values. The villa should have been worth at least $1.2 million, more than enough to pay back the loan and have money left over." I leaned back in my chair, finally understanding the full scope of my son's selfishness. He'd planned to sell his mother's beloved villa, the place where she'd been happiest, to pay off his gambling debts. "But the villa isn't worth $1.2 million, is it?" Douglas's face crumpled. "The market crashed in that region. Some kind of environmental issue with the water supply. The property is barely worth $400,000 now." "So you're short about $450,000, plus interest and penalties. The loan company is charging 30% interest on overdue payments." I did the math quickly. Douglas owed close to $1.1 million to people who weren't known for their patience. "What's your plan now?" "That's what I need to talk to you about. Dad, I know I made mistakes, but these people are going to kill me if I don't pay them." "So you want me to pay them instead?" "I want us to work together, pool our resources, maybe take out a loan against the house I inherited." I almost laughed. "The house you threw me out of?" "Dad, please. I know I hurt your feelings, but this is life and death." "It certainly is." I reached into the wooden box and pulled out Jennifer's final letter, the one I hadn't read to him yet. "Your mother had some thoughts about this situation." "What do you mean?" "She wrote this 2 weeks before she died, after she found out about everything you'd done." I unfolded the letter. "Would you like me to read it out loud?" Douglas nodded, his face pale. "My dearest Robert," I began, "by the time you read this letter, Douglas will be desperate. The loan will be overdue, the villa will be worthless, and he'll come to you begging for help. He'll cry, he'll promise to change, he'll say he's learned his lesson. Don't believe him." Douglas jerked as if I'd slapped him. Your mother continues, "Douglas has been stealing from us for over 2 years. Not just the recent thefts you've discovered, but smaller amounts going back to when his gambling problem started. He's taken approximately $130,000 total from our accounts." "That's not true," Douglas whispered. I pulled out another folder. "Bank records going back 3 years. Your mother marked every suspicious transaction." I spread them across the table. $137,426. She was off by about 7,000. Douglas stared at the records, his breathing shallow. "But here's the part that really hurt her," I continued reading. "Douglas told me last month that he wished I would hurry up and die so he could inherit everything. He said caring for a sick old woman was becoming inconvenient for his lifestyle." Douglas's face went ashen. "I never said that." "You said it in the hospital parking lot after her chemotherapy appointment." She heard every word. The room fell silent except for the sound of waves outside and Douglas's ragged breathing. "Your mother spent her final weeks making sure you couldn't destroy what was left of our family," I continued, "and she made provisions for what happens next." What kind of provisions? I looked toward the bedroom where Sarah was listening. This was the moment Jennifer had planned for, the moment when justice would finally be served. The kind that will save your life, I said, but only if you're willing to accept the consequences of what you've done. Douglas looked up at me with desperate hope. What do I have to do? First, you're going to meet someone your mother loved very much, someone she spent her final years caring for. I called out, Sarah, could you join us, please? The bedroom door opened, and Sarah emerged using her crutches. Douglas watched her approach with growing confusion. Douglas, I said, meet your sister. The shock on his face was complete and absolute. His mouth fell open, and he looked back and forth between Sarah and me as if trying to process an impossible equation. That's impossible, he finally managed. Mom never had another child. Sarah settled carefully into the chair beside me. Yes, she did. She had me when she was 17, and she gave me up for adoption because her parents threatened to disown her if she kept me. Douglas shook his head violently. No, that's not... Mom would have told me. Would she? I asked. The same way she told you about the cancer coming back? The same way you told her about your gambling debts? Sarah spoke gently. Your mother found me 2 years before she got sick. She'd been looking for me for decades. When she learned about my medical condition, she decided to help me. Medical condition? I have muscular dystrophy. It's progressive and the treatment is expensive. Your mother used her inheritance from her grandmother to buy this cabin and help with my medical bills. Douglas's face cycled through several emotions: disbelief, anger, and finally, calculation. I could see him trying to figure out how this new information affected his situation. So this cabin, it belongs to her. It belongs to both of us now, Sarah said. Your mother left it to us jointly. But it's worthless. Dad said it was worthless. Sarah and I exchanged a look. This was the moment Jennifer had been building toward. Actually, I said, your mother was wrong about one thing in her letters. The cabin isn't worth $2.7 million. Douglas's face fell. It's worth $3.4 million. The state raised their offer last week. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. Douglas stared at me as if I'd just told him the moon was made of cheese, his brain clearly struggling to process what $3.4 million meant for his desperate situation. $3.4 million, he repeated slowly. For this cabin. For this property, Sarah corrected gently. The state needs the entire lot for their marine research facility. The cabin itself will be demolished. I watched my son's face as the implications sank in. Hope flickered in his eyes, followed quickly by calculation. I could practically see him dividing the money in his head, figuring out how much he needed to save his life and how much would be left over. So we split it 3 ways? He asked. That's still over $1 million each. No, I said firmly. We don't split it 3 ways. His face fell. But Dad, I'm family too. I know I made mistakes, but you're right, Douglas. You are family, which is why your mother made provisions for you in her final arrangements. I reached into the wooden box one more time and pulled out a thick legal document. This is your mother's final gift to you, a way out of the mess you created. Douglas reached for the document with shaking hands. As he read, his expression shifted from hope to confusion to something approaching relief. She paid off my debts? He whispered. Not exactly. She arranged for them to be paid off, but with conditions. Sarah leaned forward. Your mother liquidated her life insurance policy, her jewelry, and some investments she'd kept separate from your father's accounts. She raised exactly $1.1 million. That's enough to cover everything I owe. Yes, I said. But the money doesn't go to you. It goes into a trust fund administered by your mother's lawyer. The debts will be paid directly to your creditors, and you'll never touch a penny of it. Douglas looked up from the document. What about the rest? What about my share of the property sale? I exchanged a look with Sarah. This was the hardest part, but it was exactly what Jennifer had planned. You don't get a share of the property sale, I said. Your mother left very specific instructions. Sarah gets $2 million to ensure her medical care for life. I get $1.4 million, and you... I get nothing? His voice cracked. You get your life, Sarah said quietly. Your mother saved your life, Douglas. Those men you owe money to, they don't forgive debts. Without her intervention, you would be dead within the month. Douglas slumped forward, the document falling from his hands. So I lose everything. The villa, the house, my inheritance, everything. Not everything, I said. You get to keep living. That's more than you deserved after what you did to your family. For several minutes, none of us spoke. Outside, the waves continued their eternal rhythm, and seagulls called to each other in the gathering darkness. Douglas sat with his head in his hands, finally understanding the full consequences of his choices. There is one more thing, I said finally. He looked up with cautious hope. Your mother also arranged for you to enter a gambling addiction treatment program. It's a residential facility in Colorado, one of the best in the country. If you complete the program and demonstrate real change, the trust fund will provide you with a small monthly allowance, enough to live modestly but not enough to gamble with. For how long? For as long as you stay clean. The moment you place another bet, the allowance stops permanently. Douglas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. What if I refuse? What if I don't want treatment? Then the debts remain unpaid, and you take your chances with Apex Financial. Your choice. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Gulf. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I really hurt her, didn't I? Mom, I mean. Sarah nodded sadly. She cried a lot those last few weeks, not from the cancer, from heartbreak. She loved you so much, Douglas, but she couldn't watch you destroy yourself and your father anymore. She used to talk about you when you were little, I added. She'd tell stories about your first steps, your first words, the way you used to bring her dandelions from the yard and call them flowers. She never stopped loving you, but she had to stop enabling you. Douglas broke down then, sobbing like the scared little boy he'd once been. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. The things I said, the way I treated you, I was just so desperate, so scared. I felt the old parental instinct to comfort him, but I stayed in my chair. This was his rock bottom, and he needed to feel the full weight of it. I know you're sorry, son, but being sorry doesn't fix what you broke. You have to earn forgiveness through action, not words. He nodded, still crying. The treatment program, when does it start? Next Monday. There's a car coming to pick you up from the house. You'll have the weekend to pack and say goodbye to whatever life you're leaving behind. The house goes up for sale immediately. The proceeds will go toward paying any remaining creditors and legal fees. You won't see any of that money either. Douglas absorbed this final blow with surprising acceptance. Perhaps facing the complete destruction of his old life was actually a relief after months of desperate scrambling. Will I be able to stay in touch? With you, I mean? I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. If you complete the program and stay clean, yes. But Douglas, this is your last chance. Your mother is gone, and she was the only one who was willing to bail you out repeatedly. I won't do it if you relapse, if you gamble again, if you try to manipulate or steal from anyone. You're on your own forever. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to really understand what your mother sacrificed for you. She spent her final months researching treatment programs, liquidating assets, and arranging this whole elaborate plan to save your life. She died worrying about whether you'd accept help or throw it away like you threw away everything else. Sarah spoke up. She also wanted you to know about me. She hoped that someday, when you were healthy, we could be a real family, all of us. Douglas looked at his half-sister through his tears. I have so many questions. And I have answers, but only if you get clean first. Your mother made me promise not to enable your addiction the way she had. As the evening wore on, Douglas's initial shock gave way to a kind of exhausted acceptance. We talked through the practical details of his treatment, the legal arrangements, and what would happen to his possessions. It was strange, planning the dismantling of my son's life, but it felt like performing surgery to remove a cancer. Around midnight, Douglas stood to leave. At the door, he turned back to me. "Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that the things I said about you, about Mom thinking you were a failure, they weren't true. Mom never said those things. I said them because I was angry and scared, and I wanted to hurt you." "I know." "You do?" "Your mother's letters made it very clear how she really felt about me, and how she really felt about you." He nodded, fresh tears starting. "Will you visit me at the treatment center?" "If you stay and complete the program, yes." "And after?" "If I get clean." I looked at Sarah, who was listening to our conversation with gentle attention. This was her family too now, and her opinion mattered. "One day at a time, Douglas. Prove that you've changed, and we'll see what kind of relationship is possible." After he left, Sarah and I sat on the back porch listening to the waves and processing everything that had happened. "Do you think he'll actually stay in treatment?" she asked. "I don't know. Your mother thought he would. She believed that deep down, underneath all the addiction and selfishness, there was still the little boy who used to bring her flowers. What do you think?" I considered the question carefully. "I think she gave him the best chance anyone could. Now it's up to him." 3 months later, I was standing in the same spot where I'd first met Sarah, but the cabin looked completely different. The state had purchased the property and given us 60 days to relocate. Sarah had found a beautiful, accessible home 20 minutes inland, close to her doctors but far enough from the tourist areas to be affordable. I'd bought a small house just 2 blocks away. The money from the property sale had transformed both our lives. Sarah's trust fund would cover her medical expenses and then some, giving her security she'd never had before. My portion was enough to retire comfortably and maybe even travel, something Jennifer and I had always talked about but never done. Douglas had stayed in treatment. I'd gotten weekly reports from his counselors, and the progress was slow but real. He'd completed the first phase of the program and moved into independent living within the facility. For the first time in years, he was holding down a job, even if it was just working in the facility's kitchen. Sarah had started college classes online, working toward a degree in social work. She wanted to help other people navigate the medical and financial systems that had nearly overwhelmed her before Jennifer found her. As for me, I was learning how to be happy again. The weight of Douglas's problems, the burden of Jennifer's secrets, the loneliness of feeling unloved in my own family, all of it had lifted. I had a daughter who genuinely enjoyed my company, a future that belonged to me alone, and the knowledge that Jennifer had loved me enough to orchestrate this entire elaborate plan for my happiness. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was the treatment center. "Mr. Holloway, this is Dr. Martinez. I wanted to let you know that Douglas has completed Phase 2 of the program. He's been asking about making a phone call to you." "How is he doing?" "Very well, actually. He's been working with our financial counselor to understand the damage his addiction caused, and he's expressed genuine remorse for how he treated you and your family. He'd like to apologize, if you're willing to listen." I looked out at the gulf, thinking about Jennifer and the last gift she'd given our family, the chance to heal. "Put him through." When Douglas's voice came on the line, he sounded different, quieter, more thoughtful. "Hi, Dad." "Hello, son. I wanted to thank you for giving me this chance. I know I didn't deserve it." "Your mother deserves the thanks, not me." "I know. I think about her every day. About how I wasted the time I could have spent with her and how I hurt her when she was dying." I was quiet, letting him find his words. "Dad, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I'm different now, not just because I'm not gambling, but because I understand what I lost, what I threw away." "What did you lose, Douglas?" "My family, your respect, Mom's trust, the chance to be a real son to you and a real brother to Sarah. Those things can be rebuilt if you're willing to do the work." "I am. I want to be the man you and Mom raised me to be before the addiction took over." We talked for 20 more minutes. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt about Douglas in a long time: hope. That evening, Sarah and I had dinner on her new porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. She'd made Jennifer's recipe for seafood pasta, working from notes my wife had left in her careful handwriting. "Do you miss her?" Sarah asked as we cleared the dishes. "Every day, but I'm grateful too." "For what?" "For finding out who she really was before it was too late. For understanding that she loved me enough to plan all this. For meeting you." Sarah smiled, and in that moment she looked so much like Jennifer that my heart ached. "She would have been so proud of how this turned out," she said. I nodded, looking out at the water. Jennifer had orchestrated one final act of love, saving her son's life, protecting her husband's future, and ensuring her daughter's security. She'd taken all the broken pieces of our family and arranged them into something that could heal. It wasn't the family I'd expected to have, but it was the one I needed. And for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.